So as a lot of you guys know, recently Nikon just came out with the RED V-Raptor X and Komodo X, but with the Z mount. And personally, I have been sort of on the fence on if I'm going to be shifting over my existing REDs to the Z mount as well. The biggest issue for me is just lens compatibility. A lot of my lenses are already RF mounted, and there's not a ton of Z mounted cinema lenses out there. However, I recently found out that the Megaap adapter will actually work with these RED cameras as well, which means now you can actually pair E-mount cinema lenses directly to the RED system. Personally, I like this idea a lot because it keeps the lenses pretty small. Most of your E-mount cinema lenses are fairly small because of the flange distance. It doesn't have to be a huge lens overall, which is great just for portability's sake. So when Zeiss reached out and asked if I wanted to test out their new Nano Primes, this was kind of a perfect pairing. The Nano Primes E-mounts with the Z-mount Raptors is sort of the first time I was able to put an E-mount cinema lens onto a RED camera, so I had to check it out. Now, in order to see what this lens and camera pairing could do, I wanted to bring it into a few different scenarios. The first was actually to take it out and shoot some fitness content. So I partnered up with my brother, who's a fitness athlete, and he needed some content. So I was like, what the heck, let's do it. And in order to do all these tests, I also teamed up with Justin Porter because he's an avid RED shooter as well, and he's a good friend of mine. And we wanted to just sort of see what this camera and lens pairing was capable of. Now, one of the first things I noticed about the Nano Primes straight out of the case was just how lightweight and small they are. You know, when you start thinking about cinema lenses, you tend to expect them to be these big, bulky lenses, but these Nano Primes were incredibly compact. Not only are they compact, but when it comes to focal lengths, Zeiss has every focal length pretty much covered here. I mean, you have the full run of everything you could possibly need, and it's nice that it all comes available in a single kit. Now, the kit that they let me use was the 18, 24, 35, 50, 75, and 100. And like I said, that pretty much covers everything you could possibly need. However, what I liked the most about these lenses was that no matter even if I was using one of the bigger ones like the 18 or the 100, they weren't super heavy. And even though they technically were a little bit longer, all of the focus rings and aperture ring blades all lined up perfectly. So if you were going to be attaching them to some sort of motorized control, you wouldn't have to change out everything on your system. Now, when it came to the images out of this, it's very hard to be subjective because obviously I've shot with the Raptor X and the Komodo X for a very long time, and so I'm very used to those images. But when I looked at what the lenses were giving me, they were so incredibly sharp. Now, I'm a huge proponent of having a clean set of lenses. I absolutely love lenses that have tons of character, a little chromatic aberration, and all of those things. However, I personally believe that there is a time and place for those creative looks, and then in a lot of professional environments, having a clean clinical set of lenses is a must. The other thing that I loved about these lenses was the fact that they weren't like overly in your face when it came to flaring. Also, you didn't lose a lot of contrast. You know, one thing that happens with a lot of cheaper lenses because of the coating that they have on them is once they start to flare, you can lose so much contrast. But even though when I was shooting in direct backlit situations with something literally as bright as the sun, I wasn't getting a whole lot of contrast loss in those images. Now, when it comes to a few additional specs that I found helpful with these lenses, the fact that they all started at a T1.5 was really nice. Even though I didn't necessarily need them in low light scenarios, it is good to know that you do have the option to open them up all the way to a T1.5. However, I will say that it was a little bit closer to like T2, where I did find that they really sharpened up, but they were actually pretty usable even at T1.5. The other thing that I found interesting about these lenses is that they all sport a 95mm front threaded mount, which means if you wanted to thread a filter directly to the front of this lens, you could absolutely do that. And this definitely comes in handy with lenses of this size. I mean, when I'm running and gunning with smaller lenses like this, I typically don't want to have to use a full matte box in order to be able to dial in my exposure. And so the ability to be able to throw on a variable ND in the front of these lenses makes them more usable in all scenarios. I think one of the things that really caught my attention about these lenses is that they're not a budget set of lenses. You're not going to have to make a ton of compromises. Now, granted, when it comes to the price, maybe there's a little bit of compromise there because they are more of a mid-range set of lenses. However, because they have a few different kits that you can go with, whether that's the 3-lens kit or the 6-lens kit, or if you want to just pick up one lens individually, you can absolutely do that online. It is nice to be able to have all of these different options now available thanks to Zeiss. Well, the thing I love about these lenses is the overall build design and compactness of their nature. Like I said, for me, I am all about keeping things simple, but keeping the quality high. And with a lens like this, personally paired with the Red, it kind of is a win-win. You can see from the images that we captured with these lenses, the quality that the lens itself actually produces. I think that part pretty much speaks for itself. Mostly now, what I find myself doing when it comes to looking for gear is finding stuff that works really well within my workflow. The last little bonus detail that I absolutely loved that this lens gave me that I didn't even realize that was going to be super helpful, but definitely has become helpful, is knowing that this lens has the ability to send lens data directly to the camera. And this even means going through the Megaap adapter. So even though this is a E-mount lens, I was able to send that aperture data as well as the lens data directly to the camera's metadata, and that gets saved to the camera file. Now, granted, this is not something that most people will probably need too much. However, if you're ever working in environments that require VFX work, or you just want to have this information in case you're trying to match shots later, it is so helpful to know that this feature is part of these lenses. It's not something that you have to add. It's not another note that you have to take while you're on set. And especially when I find myself in situations where I'm shooting on virtual productions where we are going to need that VFX data to add stuff in later in post, it's so nice to know that the lens information, whether that's, like I said, the aperture or the actual focal length that we're working with, is being saved to the metadata directly to the camera. And that just makes my job a little bit easier when I'm on set. But all in all, thank you so much to Zeiss for sending out these lenses. Thank you to Red for letting me check out the Zmount REDs and be able to pair this system together. I think that there is a lot of possibility now that Reds have Z mounts, and it opens up the worlds to other mounts of lenses, whether that's PL, Z, or E mounts. I'm super excited to continue to test. I can't wait to get my hands on these Nano Primes again to be able to put them through an actual project. And so I think that's gonna be even more fun. But as a first round test, I have to say they were pretty successful and I can't wait to use them again. But thank you so much to everyone for watching this video. If you guys have any questions, leave those down below in the comment section and I will catch you guys in the next video.